Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. We're fueled by coffee and cranberry trail mix today, and some organic, salted, roasted, mixed nuts. I'm going to start on the topic of trade unions and maybe a little bit on worker co-ops just in passing, but I want to talk about unions. And the reason is that unions, if you're talking about class struggle, class warfare, where a few people at the top are lording it over most of us lower down, unions are the antidote, or could be the antidote. Richard Wolff, I'll let him start, and then I'll make his case for worker co-ops briefly. Richard Wolff.
Labor unions have been, for at least 2 centuries, a mechanism used by workers in all countries to improve their situation, to get higher wages and to get better working conditions. How do they do that? By representing all of the workers together, because it's clear that they can bargain more successfully with the employer if they do it as one unified group rather than as an individual, each one bargaining with the employer. When that happens, the employer can play one individual off against another, and if they are all in a union, that is not available as a tactic to the employer.
I remember one company, won't mention their name, that I worked for was very frustrated if drivers talked to each other about their wages because I remember one time I got a raise and I went in and a manager had written on a piece of paper, he had my new hourly rate on a paper and he just showed it to me because he didn't want anyone else to hear. And it was understood that all of us drivers would not talk to each other about our hourly rate. Ha ha ha. And of course we did. But employers know that if they're trying to keep the hourly pay lower, that they don't want workers talking to each other. Workers get fired for talking to each other about their hourly pay. They can, or at least they can be disciplined for it. And this is right at the heart of what Richard is talking about.
That's why workers like unions, and that's why employers don't. So unions enhance the position of working people. They can put pressure, they can bargain, they can negotiate, and in the end they can also strike in order to get improved wages and working conditions. The history of the United States is identical to the history of all other capitalist countries in being the history of successive waves of efforts by labor unions to improve the wages and working conditions in their countries.
Okay, so that's what unions do, or have done. Now, unions could do a lot better, and a lot of the word company union applies to unions I've worked in, where the union won't actually do anything. All they do is pay lip service. They're really working for the bosses, and they keep the rank and file from rising up and doing stuff like this in this picture by lip service and by shenanigans, backroom deals. And so unions, if people are critical of unions because they don't actually do what they're supposed to do, they're right, I think. And then Richard goes on to say that with a worker co-op, instead of employers bargaining with employees, the employees are the employers. And so they don't have to bargain. They hopefully will operate in their own best interests. Now, another reason to talk about unions is over the years, both political parties have weakened unions on purpose. And if you want to really change things, hope and change comes, at least if as you're getting traction, at least it comes from unions and pickets and the kinds of quick action. I was showing you a clip with Krystal interviewing and Sogar and Jetty interviewing the president of the flight attendants union, and it was exciting because instead of waiting for the political process to solve problems, workers can solve their own problems. They don't need politicians. They can just go out on the streets, they can shut things down, and in a day, things can change, or maybe 60 days, but way faster than the political process can do, because the political process is designed to keep us simmering in our pot. It's designed to keep us from striking and solving the problems ourselves. So incrementalism is really just a way to keep us from rising up and solving our own problems. It isn't a way to fix things one step at a time. Nobody has any intention in either political party of fixing anything. We need to understand that. We've been at it for about 70 years with different presidents from different political parties, and it's stagnant. Nothing for the worker has really gotten better, but things have gotten a lot better for the fat cats at the top. So truck drivers, I think truck drivers are a good indicator of the country, and this is why. More people than any other profession drive for a living. So driving is our biggest profession, which is scary if you think about automation that's coming. So the American worker can be represented by truck drivers. You can say truck drivers represent the labor force of the United States. So if we look at truck drivers specifically, what we see is that about 75% of them are lean Republican, which is odd historically, because historically labor has more often been represented by leftist parties than by right. And so it's kind of inverted or back asswards in our country, where the workers tend to be Republican leaning and the elitists tend to be Democrats. And so what's going on here is it's hocus pocus. We're supposed to be fooled by that in voting, and that's why, if you really get to the bottom of things, that's why so many Republican workers vote against their own best interests. But supposed liberals also do that. They vote against their own interests too when they vote for Democrats, because voting for either party is voting against your own best interests. That's the revelation that we need to come to. Noam Chomsky talks about this briefly here.
The working class has suffered from it. They had a real need for hope and change. Well, they didn't get hope and they didn't get change. I don't usually agree with Sarah Palin, but I think she nailed it when she asked at one point, where's all this hopey changey business? Well, there wasn't any. So no hope, no change. Already it showed very quickly in midterm and future elections. This election, a con man came along and is offering hope and change, and they're voting for it. Suppose that people like you, the people who formed the Sanders movement, would present an authentic, constructive program for real hope and change. It would win these people back. I think many of the Trump voters.
It would. So these people, I'd say, you could say, if you win the truckers, you could win the whole thing. If you win the truckers and the teachers, two interesting segments, big swaths of the working class are truckers and teachers. And if you had both of those groups, you would be guaranteed. Now, after you win them over, it can't be a shell game. After you win them over, then you have to provide the hope and change that everybody wants. But truckers and teachers both want hope and change. They've been promised things by both parties, and neither party has delivered. Teachers have tended to vote Democrat. Truckers have tended to vote Republican. And look where it's gotten us. Neither party has given us anything like hope and change. Now here is TYT, and I've shown in a previous clip and also in a Medium article that they have some ties to the Clinton machine in terms of money. And so when you watch Cenk Uygur, he does this dance. I'm not going to talk a lot about it now, but he does this switching. He seems to be progressive, but when it comes down to it, he's working for the Clinton machine. And you can yell about me in the comments, you can yell at me and we can have a discussion about it. But sometimes TYT is worth listening to. And on this one, they've given, whether you agree with everything Anna and Cenk are saying, they give you some really good data about the industry of trucking and what has been promised and what has not been delivered.
Policy decisions he's been making, because they are hurting truckers and they are really feeling the pain. In fact, Business Insider...
Let me get the volume up here.
Spoke to some of these truckers, and the quotes are pretty incredible. Now, keep in mind that the majority of truckers are conservative. I'll give you those numbers in just a minute. But everyone Business Insider spoke to voted for Trump. Morris Kaufman, a lifelong conservative, is one of the people who voted for Trump. He's a trucker, and he says, quote, "Trump is absolutely a moron. His idiotic ideas will tank the economy even further."
Love it.
He also said, quote, "You cannot bully your way to a good economy." And what he's referring to there is the trade war. The trade war has really hurt truckers. It's hurt manufacturing in America. And what does Trump have to say when that type of criticism comes up? He says, "My life would be a lot easier if I didn't take on China, but I like doing it because I have to do it." What does that even mean?
It means that face.
It's amazing.
He's such a baby.
Let me give you some more. Trump's trade wars are expected to reduce the average U.S. household's income by $580 by 2020, and that's according to the Congressional Budget Office. They did analysis on this and just released a report. Now, J.L. Sims is another trucker who happened to vote for Trump, and he says, quote, "The truth about the rates being so low is Trump's trade policies. Manufacturers are scared. Last month's manufacturing jobs numbers finally began to reflect the reduced production. Everyone looks at unemployment rates and thinks, mistakenly, that the economy is in great shape. Manufacturing tells the real story." This is a conservative, guys. This is a conservative. It's not me saying that the unemployment numbers are BS and it's not a good metric to look at when you...
I have to comment in passing. This is a conservative, guys. The elitism is the problem I have with Cenk and Anna and Emma Vigilant also. They're obviously coming at this from a liberal, in the worst sense of the word, from a conceited, arrogant, white, upper middle class perspective, from the elitist perspective. And so as someone who grew up on the other side of things, I feel if you're a trucker, if you're one of my friends who's a trucker, I could see why you'd be offended by her demeanor here.
You want to talk about a robust economy. This is a conservative who's in this field and sees firsthand how disastrous Trump's economic policies have been.
So let's put more numbers to it, because Business Insider looked at transport research groups and what they've reported. Year over year, trucking loads have gone down 37% in July, and rates for those same loads have gone down by 18%. So
what he hasn't said is year over year, it's been 6 months now. Year over year has gone down for 6 months straight. So his point is going to be in a second that that's a harbinger for a big crash in the economy. And then he goes on to say that Trump has no chance in a down economy. And nobody has a chance. No sitting president has a chance when the economy tanks. So then Mickey Mouse could win. So then we have to figure out what winning means, because if we have someone like Obama, who's a Trojan horse, promising hope and change that doesn't come, then we're no better off than we are with Trump. What we need is not somebody who's going to promise things and then not actually deliver. Senator Bernie Sanders wants to roll out an ambitious plan to strengthen organized labor. So if we go back to Dr. Wolff's presentation, we've got labor unions as a step forward to help the plight of workers. And Bernie Sanders is on it. Of all the candidates, he's the one who actually wants to strengthen unions. And if you look at Elizabeth Warren, she speaks to this issue, but she's still speaking mostly on behalf of the captains of industry who don't like unions. And that's why Third Way and other think tanks prefer Elizabeth Warren. And I'm gonna close out with the idea that white liberals, who have traditionally been the leaders of the Democrat Party, elitist, white, suburban neoliberals now are running things. They prefer Elizabeth Warren, which should make us all very nervous. Not just all people, blue collar, white collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you're wearing, says George Carlin. All of us should be nervous. All of us who have traditionally voted Democrat, like teachers, all of us who have traditionally voted Republican, like truckers, all of us should be nervous about expecting Donald Trump, Barack Obama, either one, to offer real hope and change. Here's Krystal's take on it. She's been doing really well lately. She's had one really excellent clip she had was on the bias that's inherent in MSNBC and CNN and other corporate news agencies. The bias is this elitist bias where people don't even know what's going on in the working world. And so when they report things, they automatically leave out the perspective of real hardworking Americans. So here she goes again.
Something new is happening in the Democratic presidential race. An important dynamic has shifted big time. Let me explain. So here's basically the story of the campaign so far. Biden's at the top and Bernie is number 2. Two candidates with very different ideological positioning, but actually a lot of overlap in their coalitions. Their supporters tend to be diverse. They tend to be working class. So both candidates, frankly, are a little down market for the wealthy, educated white liberals who are so influential in terms of money and in terms of media coverage. After all,
they're influential in terms of money and media coverage. And one of the things I've shown in a past episode of the Bernie or Bust show is that they're connected to talent agencies. And that surprised me. I'd never figured this out before, but there's a connection, and the Podesta emails, the WikiLeaks emails show this connection between the elitists, the captains of industry, and Third Way and Center for American Progress think tanks. And then when you look at the leaders, the ones she's talking about, it's really corrupt. Look, go on.
Bernie or Biden went to a fancy school or worked at McKinsey or have ever been compared to JFK. Now, it's important.
What I was going to say is that when the talent agencies have clients who are doing what Krystal's doing, who especially for the big corporate news outlets, you've got this bias that's coming from their connection to, well, look what they did to Tulsi. We've got this place where Tulsi snubbed the DNC. She gave up her position, and then a talent agency exec told a fellow talent agency exec that they had put the hammer down on Tulsi's career because they weren't going to help her raise money. How is that going to end her career? How is that going to put the hammer down? But what they really did is they blacklisted Tulsi, and the evidence is coming out every day. And so the people on the talent roster, athletes and people like Spike Lee who make movies, and people who are actors and actresses, and news anchors all have this message. Oh, Tulsi pissed off the wrong people. We're going to end her. And that's why the polling doesn't favor Tulsi. That's why she keeps getting smeared, and they keep referring back to Assad and all this stuff, calling her an Assad apologist. All this is coming from these white elitist Democrats that Krystal is unpacking here.
Understand that the preferences and the tastes of mainstream media tend very much to mirror the preferences and the tastes of well-off white liberals, since those are the people who disproportionately populate newsrooms, consume cable news, and pay for subscriptions to the Times and the Post. So outside of Biden 1 and Bernie 2, all of the rest of the jumping around in the polls can basically be seen as white liberals trying to find their one true love. First it was Beto, then it was Mayor Pete, then it was Kamala, and now it's Elizabeth Warren. Now, you might think with that early campaign history of white liberal searching that another candidate may soon have their turn in the sun. Maybe, but I don't think so. And this is the thing that has fundamentally shifted. Well-off white liberals who write checks, who drive that media coverage, have decided that Elizabeth Warren is the one. You can see it in the data. Pew Research shows how she's consolidated support among the most highly educated and also the most liberal of the Dem base. Her coalition is all...
I've got some data for that. Democratic primary voter support. Voters earning less than $50,000 favor Sanders 22% to 12%. That's almost double. Voters without college degrees, 22% to 10%. That's more than double. And then with college degrees, it's a draw. And with postgraduate degrees, the people Krystal's talking about probably favor Warren 19% to Sanders 12%. And the title of this article is Progressives for Warren, Your Class is Showing. And that's really what Krystal's talking about here.
Also the whitest of the top candidates, by the way. I no longer count Mayor Pete as a top candidate. But it was an article in the Post that really helped things to click into view for me. The article and accompanying video was described this way. The Post's theater critic is reviewing the performances of the Democratic candidates. In this installment, Elizabeth Warren cuts a Shakespearean figure in Arizona. Now, as fawning as the setup was, the ensuing content was even worse. On the road, she's an oratorical rock star, a narrator intones. Warren bounds onto the stage. Her wardrobe is a blouse worn untucked over dark slacks and open-toed shoes. The outfit conveys a lack of pretense, a person ready to meet you on equal terms. The article said, in a grittily poetic way, her spiel is akin to that of a folksy troubadour, whatever that is. She is the Springsteen of campaign 2020.
Imagine an article that would ever come out that would talk about Bernie Sanders like that in mainstream media. Obviously, it's never going to happen. Right there, that should tell you a whole hell of a lot about the way the Elizabeth Warren is favored and who favors her. That should just make you cringe in horror.
Something, guys. And as I listened uncomfortably, I realized they are all in for her. I mean, look, you all know I respect Bernie Sanders. I don't hide the ball on that. But if I ever put out a video about anyone that is this obsequiously fawning and devoid of substance, I demand that you unsubscribe en masse. Lest you write this off, though, as just one article, take a look at this from 538. So Warren was mentioned in more online news stories last week than any other candidate, and she saw a significant jump in her cable news coverage. So did Sanders, by the way, but mostly because they were so mad about him daring to criticize the Bezos-owned Washington Post. Or if you need more proof, Bloomberg reports that at the Monogram shop in East Hampton, a place where the wealthy apparently go to buy cups bearing the names of their favorite candidates, all the Warren cups are sold out. In fact, a new poll from economist YouGov has an incredibly telling statistic. Of those making more than $100K a year, a full 74% are considering Warren as their potential candidate. The next closest was Kamala Harris, way down at 49%. I'm telling you, the white liberals have found their candidate.
That is scary because the white liberals run the DNC, and the DNC can decide, with or without voter approval, who the nominee is.
Warren is the one. She has now entered the positive feedback loop where glowing media coverage leads to more white liberal support, which leads to even more glowing media coverage, and on we go. So this is the race, folks. Biden, Bernie, Warren. The white, wealthy, liberal shopping period has ended. They have found the candidate who makes them feel good, feel virtuous, but with the populist flair that's in style this campaign season, with a perfect blend of Oklahoma roots but Ivy League connections, with a speaking style that is elevated but just folksy enough to imagine someone outside of their milieu responding to it. And importantly, who's calling for reform rather than revolution. Now look, I've said here before, I like Warren. Of all the establishment lane candidates, she's my favorite. The most genuine, the most progressive, the best understanding of how the economy does not work for ordinary people. But I have to say, it makes me uncomfortable just how comfortable elites seem with her, enamored even. I mean, you even had the pro-corporate third way giving her their stamp of approval. If she's supposedly so close to Sanders on the ideological spectrum, why such comfort with her? And why such fear and loathing then of Bernie? Perhaps because Warren offers that holy grail for liberal elites, enough change and woke signaling to make them feel virtuous, but not so much as to actually threaten their status. You might call this the Obama zone.
The Obama zone. That's exactly it. If you get a chance, listen to Phil Oakes' old but wonderful song, Love Me, I'm a Liberal, because it shows this exact Obama zone where they don't really care about black people, they don't really care about other kids' education, they want to keep their distance from the unwashed masses, but they want to feel good about themselves. They want you to say nice things about them because they're woke, but they're not really woke. They're just enough to, it's like a Band-Aid, and we've got hemorrhaging and we got to fix it. Is Elizabeth Warren going to do more than wag her finger at the billionaires? I don't think so. And I think that's why third way John Cowan will accept her while he calls Bernie an existential threat. What we need, looking at this fist here underneath my face, what we need is an existential threat to the oligarchs. And that's Bernie Sanders. He's the only one.